Good morning, and I do realize that I am between you and lunch ultimately, so I will be prompt. I promise. All right, so here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to go over a little bit of why and get into kind of understanding other people, the people we're working with. If we're talking about collaboration, then really what we're talking about here during the session is people. So if you're uncomfortable with people and you don't really want to learn anything more or new about people, probably ought to find another spot, maybe hallway con, whatever. Come see me at the registration desk afterwards, whatever you like. And then we'll talk about choice architecture and kind of conclude and finish everything. I'll begin with some first about me. That's a good place to start. A kind of written summary of some things that I've done. I am a family man. I'm a Catholic Christian. I run in these things, and they're very comfortable. Yes, I do love them. I've done martial arts for many years. I'm very involved in the Austin community in particular. And as Austin mentioned, I run the security operations team at Advisory Board. So I have not been hands-on keyboard for many years, which is why I'm not giving a technical presentation. Not that I was any good at it when I was behind the keyboard, but largely I hack relationships and I hack people now rather than technology. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. So in terms of that, let's make sure we're all on the same page as far as expectations go. What you should expect of me is that I'm not an expert in this field by a long stretch, and I hope to be able to communicate that accurately to you. I am not an expert here. This is not, by all means, clearly in 35, 40 minutes, whatever they've given me, there's no way I could be comprehensive, and there's no way that I can do this without your participation. So please participate. What you should expect of yourself out of this topic, and hopefully during this session as well, is that there are other people out there that you have to work with, or do work with, or enjoy working with, but none of them are all like you. So we have to learn something about what other people are like, because they're not all like us. And please be open as we go through to some different ideas, some stuff that you may not have considered before in terms of how you work with people and what you consider in either your existing position or future kind of roles you want to fulfill, what you might be able to do differently than you have done in the past. If you know me at all, or if you've heard talks that I've given in the past, you know that I have a particular emphasis or enjoyment of the topic of leadership. This is one of my favorite quotes about leadership. So collaboration, communication is really what I'm talking about today, but ultimately it's because I'm interested in learning more about how to be an effective leader. And communication is a big part of what that is, which is why I'm talking about that now and have kind of rejiggered some of my talking opportunities towards communication and collaboration versus just the concept of leadership. But ultimately what we have to learn about is how to listen well for communication. Communication is largely about listening and not so much about what you have to say. Communication and leadership in particular are not about the role you have, so it's not about your job position or your title, right? It's not about what you think, it's really about what you do. And it's not about you on your own or acting by yourself. It's about how you work with other people. That's kind of the source of leadership. So what more is leadership is about is what the actions that you're taking. What are you doing here? Not what are you thinking about, but what are you doing? How are you taking initiative in your role in the office or outside the office? And how well do you work with other people? My emphasis in leadership, both in talking at conferences like this, in working with my colleagues in the office, and in working with friends outside of the office, is in finding opportunities for all of us to lead where we are right now. Not to look for that future position, and I'm going to be a leader when I get that next job. I'm going to be a leader when I get elected such and such, or I'm going to be a leader in the future when I have more wisdom and experience. Leadership is about where you are right now. It's about what you can do today. So keep that in mind as we go. Here's my kind of overview. So we'll start with why. Why are we talking about this at all? We all have to work with people, whether we like it or not, to get our job done, especially in security, right? I think everybody in the everybody in the audience can use something of what I'm talking about today. None of this is exclusive to a particular job role or a particular job function in any way. We're not talking about, even though you could be doing this in a security role, we're not talking about how to coerce or mandate folks to do something, but we are talking about how to influence them and guide them into making good decisions and secure decisions in particular. So So the way, or the place that I'm going to begin with, and the reason that I think that you can learn something here is because we're going to work and start talking about intuition and about behavior. So our own intuition, the kind of human intuition process, and then the behavior of ourselves and the behavioral style of ourselves and other people. So let's start with intuition. And in order to do that, I have a few quick tests. You may not have expected a pop quiz, but we'll all take the pop quiz here. Okay? All right, so here's the first question. Focus here. Think. Pop quiz. How much does the ball cost? Bat and the ball together is $1.10. Bat is $1. How much does the ball cost? Right? That's kind of the first thing that jumped to mind. And that's wrong. 5 cents. If you do the math in your head, one more time, the math, okay, costs 5 cents. Now, here's the second one. So now you have a hint that these are trick questions, right? 5 machines, 5 minutes, 5 widgets. What is 100 machines and 100 widgets? 100 minutes, right? No, 5 minutes, right? Intuition games. What's happening here? There's a patch of lily pads in the lake. The patch doubles in size, right? It takes 40 every day. 48 days to cover the entire lake. You guys are binary mathematicians, right? It's not 24 days. It's 47, right? Okay, so intuition plays games with us. Intuition, our fast-thinking mode, is not necessarily something we always want working. We want it working when we're about to be cut off on the highway, right? We want to intuitively turn away from the car that's going to run into us. But we don't always need or want our intuition working the way that it was, for whatever reason, built to work, okay? I kind of tried to fool you in the sense that I highlighted the quick version of these tests. And if you don't stop to think about these things, then you will get it wrong because your brain, jumps to an answer. This kind of all comes from some foundational research by 2 different groups led by Kahneman and Thaler. So this is decades old. This is stuff you can read about if you've heard of this book, Thinking Fast and Slow, or the book Nudge by Thaler and Sunstein. They go into it in great depth, and depending on your style of reading or the kind of writing that you like, Thinking Fast and Slow is more interesting to you, or Nudge is more interesting to you. But either way, they both talk about this concept of system 1, or the intuitive system, or the slow system, or the fast system rather, or system 2, or the reflective system. Okay, so here's the breakdown: automatic thinking, instinctive thinking, emotional, concrete, and immediate. Kind of felt that as we were going through that set of quick tests. The second system is slow, is logical. That's why reflective is another word for it. Deliberate, and it requires effort. So the reason why you get worn out at the end of the day is because you've been thinking all day, and that takes brain power. That's why most of us are most fresh and available to make solid, good decisions, slow, thoughtful, logical decisions in the morning. Here's a hack for you. If you need people to make a really big decision and you need them to think about it, don't ask them at the end of the workday. It's probably something that you now have intuitively figured out. But if you need people to make a decision and you have a chance to put something on the calendar, don't put it at the end of the day. Put it in the beginning of the day. You'll get more thoughtful, deliberate, slow thinking from people. The point of all this is that your intuition and my intuition can be wrong. Keep that in mind as we go. Let's talk a little bit about behavior as well. Here's a typical email that we might receive, right? From a project manager. It's terse, it's blunt, it's demanding. How many people have received a message like that from their manager or another manager in the company, right? Is this, am I wrong? Right? Okay. And the first thing you think about is, in terms of how this person is behaving towards you, is I'm in trouble, right? Either I'm late on something, or I owe something to this person, or what's wrong? What did I do wrong, right? The second kind of email that you might get in terms of the way that somebody's behaving, a marketing director in particular, you might get an enthusiastic, optimistic, very unclear email. And the first thing I think about when I get these kind of emails, because yes, I get these as well, is I'm confused. What is supposed to happen here? What is my job? What is my role? What's going on? This person's behavior, via email admittedly, this person's behavior is confusing me. You'll notice that in terms of these adjectives, this could be just as well me walking up and having a conversation with Austin. I could be terse and blunt and demanding in my communication verbally. I can be enthusiastic and optimistic and unclear in my communication with you as well. The third example from a developer, perhaps from some folks in the audience, I might receive an email that is very thorough and it's very objective, and there's no way that I could possibly comply with it because it is very uncompromising. We must do it this way. There's no option. And because we're all security people, we have been this person as well. So the first thing I think about when I get emails like this is I'm overwhelmed. What is supposed to happen here? Again, the behavior of this person is confusing me. How am I supposed to react and work with this person? There's really no such thing as a typical email in this regard, but the point is that our interpretation of these things, because it was an email and it's written, this person is not in front of me, I'm not looking at them in the eye, I'm not seeing inflection and body posture and the way that they're trying to I just saw that the way that I message that is making you react, let me calm down and help you understand what I'm trying to say. This was an email, it's written. You only have one opportunity to interpret this. And your interpretation can be wrong, especially if you don't know these the people you're working with. So that's why this is all important. So let's go now into how we can understand some of these things, how we can understand what might be going on. First, we'll work on the behavioral piece. Okay, some of the stuff we just saw is based on the behavioral instrument style called DISC, D-I-S-C. Okay, those are classic DISC behavioral styles that I'll explain in just a second. Behavioral styles are not personalities, okay? So that means that if you have a Myers-Briggs personality type, okay, it's not the same thing as your DISC personality, your DISC behavioral style. You can change your DISC behavioral style depending on who you're working with. That's a key takeaway for you. That if DISC is something that starts to get, as I explained it, if it's appealing to you, you want to learn something more about how to work with other people, you can learn that with a project manager, you should also be a little bit more terse and blunt and straightforward. With a marketing director, you should be a little bit more enthusiastic, or at least willing to talk about the person's weekend versus what they need this Monday morning, right? Okay? So there's a lot to learn about DISC, but it can become very helpful in understanding how to decipher the behavioral style or the communication of people you're working with. So again, D is over here. So the breakdown of DISC is everything above the line is extroverted. Everything below the line is introverted. Okay? Everything to the right of the quadrant of the line is focused on people, and everything to the left is focused on tasks. Okay? So upper left quadrant, task, extroverted, right? Very forceful, very dominant, in your face. Let's get the question answered. Eye contact. Okay? Really wants to make sure that we get the job done. Lots of managers, leaders, executives fall into this category, not even necessarily inherently. It's just they get results that way. So if your objective is to get results, then D is often the area you fall into. Okay? Because again, you can change your behavioral style. I, in the extroverted area, focused on people. I'm a high I, believe it or not. So I'm enthusiastic and optimistic and oftentimes unclear with my team, as some of them can assert or can attest to. And then most often in our technical crowd, like today, C we'll find in IT or in security in particular, we'll find the conscientious folks most often. The predominant folks in the audience are C. Trupti? Yeah?
What about ambiverts?
What's that? Oh yeah. Folks who are multiple. So the DISC model is very much a multiple. So it is relatively rare, but you can have 3. You can't usually really have 4, all 4. But you probably tested wrong if you tested all 4. But you can represent in 3. Or most often you see folks kind of show up 2. But again, highly often you'll have people who are high in one area. I don't want to dwell too much on it, but the point is that D folks can get straight to the point. They can be right in your face until they get what they're looking for. I folks are influence. Are your collaborators, your enthusiastic people, but they really need to be paid attention to. You need to cultivate people like me so that I feel like I'm not being ignored. Are your S's are your biggest team players, your strongest team players. Because again, they are introverted and reserved, but they're people focused, okay? They're really focused on making sure that the team succeeds, okay? Not necessarily that the tasks are accomplished, but that the team succeeds. They're very supportive and calm. They're excellent, excellent team leaders. Conscientious folks, again, highly often in tech environments, you'll see this display itself. And so both the most rewarding and the hardest part about working with Cs is the objectiveness and the thoroughness and detail. So sometimes it can take a while to get an answer out of a C because the tendency there is to be thorough and make sure that everything's right and I's are dotted and T's are crossed 50 times. Okay. Okay. So with that background in terms of behavior, now we're going to move on to that intuition or thinking idea. So we had two kind of major concepts, behavior and intuition. Talked about behavior and DISC. Well, now we're going to talk about intuition and thinking, especially in terms of becoming or architecting choices. I mentioned a little earlier before, but a brief history is that this kind of falls in the area of behavioral economics and behavioral psychology. It's, for the most part, pioneered by Kahneman and Tversky and Thaler and Sunstein. Okay, these are your fathers or leaders in the space. Plenty of research papers, also some books that are accessible to you and me. I don't know about the research papers being accessible, depending on which way you go there, but certainly there's tons and tons of research and content here. And again, just to be clear with everything that we're talking about in this area, this is all backed up by strong research science. I am not a research scientist in this area. I am not an expert, but these guys are, okay? And they've done all the research. This goes back to the 70s. So they've been doing this stuff for 4 or 5 decades. Let's talk about one approach. So I mentioned the book Nudge by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. And this is kind of their approach to doing choice architecture or decision architecture is here. And it's actually, it follows, you can see, it follows the retronym here. But incentives, right? People really need to know that there's a reason for making this choice, that they're getting something. You need to help them understand what's going on and understand how they see things. Again, the behavioral stuff can help. You set up a default. So we talk a lot in security about secure by default or building security in by design, right? And this is part of the choice architecture concept. Go figure, we weren't the first people to think about it, okay? Giving feedback, expecting that people are going to make mistakes. Again, very common in our line of work to prepare choices and prepare situations where we expect that someone is going to do something wrong or expect that they're going to make a mistake, as well as setting up things so that we can break it down and not be overly complex. So the problem with a hard decision, the more complex it is, the least likely it is for someone to even make the decision. They're going to turn away and go somewhere else. So you have to make complex decisions that are complex, like some of the ones we have to architect. You need to break it down into small, sizable chunks or understandable chunks so that it's a simple and easy to understand. This is the kind of second approach, just in terms of understanding how to design choices and architectures, or how to architect choices. This is described in detail in a Harvard Business Review article that I'll have a link for you on. But their approach is similar in the sense that you have to define the problem, you diagnose it, and you design that solution. Okay, so let's talk through that. This kind of thing that we're talking about here, understanding people's intuition, understanding people's intuitive choices and decisions is most effective when their behavior, the choices that people are going to make, is the core of the problem. And people are not always able to act in their own best interests. Now you have to be a little bit of paternalistic here, okay, and realize, and again, we're in security, so this is part of what we do, but we have made some sort of assertion that we know the right decision, right? At least we know the secure decision. It may not be the risk-based decision, but we know what the secure decision is here, and that's the idea in terms of people's best interest from a security standpoint or where we're coming from. Now, in terms of figuring out what the cause of an inappropriate decision is, or what may be going wrong, like why people are making poor decisions, why people aren't making the secure decision we want them to make. These are the two main causes. People aren't motivated to take that action, which goes back again to the incentives concept. Or they have some sort of cognitive bias going on in making that decision. They have some sort of thinking mode that is making it impossible for them to see the right choice. An availability heuristic, a selection bias, a confirmation bias. These kinds of biases, which are described again in exhaustive detail in the books that I have for you, Thinking Fast and Slow and Nudge. These biases that come into play can prevent you and me from honestly even seeing the right decision to make. So if this is not part of your calculus in determining and building a decision in terms of security, in terms of how you're working with people, if you're not thinking about the fact that your audience and your group can be biased, then you may just completely miss, that they'll never be able to make the right decision. Okay? Now, in designing the right solution, we want to improve folks' decisions. We want to structure and design that choice, and then slowly nudge and gently nudge people in the right direction. The key here to a good solution, a good choice that we architect, is that people still feel like they have the freedom to make the choice. So let's talk in a bit more detail here about examples and kind of clear things up. And I'm curious if folks have some interesting examples they've used in their workplace. So again, we're talking about how we can leverage people's intuitive or reflective thinking. In terms of system one triggering, these are the ways that you do it, right? If you want somebody to think fast on purpose, right? So if you want them to make the right decision, then you can focus on getting them to feel something, right? The most common way that this was done in security was the fear, uncertainty, and doubt concept, right? So I need to trigger somebody to make the right decision by spreading fear, by fomenting some sort of emotion that's going to push people in the right direction. Now, I'm not advocating for that, but I tell you, it can be effective, at least initially, right? I think many of us have some experience with that. I've mentioned some bias concepts here, and also process simplification. But let me just say that the most powerful way to leverage quick or fast thinking in terms of getting the right collaborative decision making, the right collaborative choice architecture, is in building a default workflow or default loadout or default system that is secure. The default is what you want, right? So the most common way that this is done in like HR systems and business, we have all experienced, whether you realize it or not. It's retirement savings plans. Okay, so you may or may not realize, and it may be different in your organizations, but many organizations now, because of the research work done in this area, your default when you are provisioned or when you sign up or when you take the job that you've taken now, or you've been given a choice to make a contribution, a defined contribution plan, your default now is that you're enrolled. Your default is that you have a 1% contribution or a 5% or whatever it is, right? I mean, something that's digestible or that you're willing to make. But you have to opt out now, right? I mean, how many folks have seen what I'm talking about? Are you familiar with what? Okay, no. So do you have a retirement plan at work? And if so, because I only saw a few hands raised. If so, are you enrolled? Great. And were you given the option to enroll, to opt out, or is this an opt-in program for you guys? Anybody willing to volunteer some details?
Opt-in.
It's only opt-in? Okay. So the research work done in this area is that there is something on the order of if you give folks the opt-in opportunity, then something like 10 to 20% of people opt in to a retirement savings plan, right? Which is critical to you being healthy in retirement age. And if you make it opt out, it's something closer to 50%. right? So I mean, there are drastic changes here. Another common way in which this is this happens, again, it's financial, and again, it's in the corporate setting, is in other kinds of savings plans, right? Where you say, all right, here's another kind of program. We have a defined retirement savings program, and right now you're enrolled at 1%, and every year, unless you tell us otherwise, every year from now we're going to increase your contribution by 0.5%. So you can opt out of it, but every year from here on out, we're going to raise you up to 1.5%, and then 2%, and then 2.5%, and then 3%. And the reason why that works is because it's a future planning concept. And all of us just inherently are built to think about that's tomorrow. Today is what I'm worried about, and tomorrow will take care of itself. So this is one way in which this is being triggered. And I don't have a lot of great ways, other than negative, that we can take advantage of that in security, but I'm curious if there are examples of ways in which people have taken advantage of fast thinking or kind of emotional or bias-based choices that people have architected. Does anybody have anything interesting that they've done or seen, been a participant of or a party to? Yeah?
Pride and craftsmanship. You get the developers and the security guys together, seeing them
Nice.
as one team, looking towards, none of us wants egg on our face.
It's good.
Let's do this right.
It's a good example. That's a good example. Again, yeah. So the example is kind of pride in craftsmanship or pride of ownership in terms of the result, right? The build or the release of software, right? Not playing on as much as just arousing the emotion or the investment that a development team or a development group or a whole company has made in the result of that software, of the resulting software, right? We don't want it to just do what it's supposed to do. We want it to also not do what it's not supposed to do, right? Yes, ma'am.
So it seems to me that sort of what you're talking about is like the path of least resistance. And
Yeah.
people are going to naturally flow towards what's easy.
Absolutely. The tyranny of the default, right? Just in repeating that the default option or the kind of the easy path is what folks are going to choose. So designing that and creating that is what we want to try to always strive towards, and finding a way in which it happens, right? So some other ways that might happen is in terms of, hey, let me automatically feed in results from a security tool into your remediation system as developers, right? So rather than giving you something more to do, rather than slapping a report on your desk and, hey, here are the bugs you have to fix in your software, or here are the flaws you have to fix, let me make it easy for you. Let me set up and queue up this bug or this flaw that you have to fix. Let me just put it in your system and make it so easy for you to add to your Agile backlog or whatever that you need to do in terms of planning your next sprint or this or that, right? Let me put it right there in front of you, and so it's easy for you to say, you know what? I can tackle one of those security bugs this sprint. We can tackle this group right here and take care of it the next time because it's right there. They already made it easy for us. All right. In terms of System 2 stuff, this is where we want to set up situations where we want to make opportunities to give people opportunities to think more. Okay, this is much more often where we end up in security. What we're trying to do is make people think versus the opposite, where they are not thinking. Right? They are just clicking on the link when they get the email. Oh, it's an email, and then there's a link in it. I must click it. Right? There's an email with a PDF attachment. I'm supposed to double click it. That's what I do. I double click PDF attachments when they come in. Okay? So what we're trying to do is create opportunities for folks to reflect and take a step back. The best example I have here is in pre-pending email subjects when they come in from anything external, right? So you get a message from outside the company, just any email, right? Like marketing email, your buddy at another company sends you a message to say, where are we going for lunch? Whatever, doesn't matter. It's pre-pended with something like external or outside or probably not suspicious, but maybe suspicious. Who knows? But you pre-pen the email subject, every email subject from outside the organization in a particular way. What that does now is create a chance for people to look and see and notice, whoa, that's not for my CEO because it has the external tag, right? This is something that doesn't compute. I have a message that looks like it's from my IT team a message that looks like it's from security saying I need to change my password, but it says external. There's something broken here. There's something that now I have to take a step back and think for a second and see, wait, there's something that's not right here. Okay? Other examples that folks have in how they engage system 2. How do you make people think slowly? How do you make people reflect when you want them to make the right choice? What are you guys doing? Sir?
Ask people to reflect on their own history.
Okay, so unpack that a little bit more for me. Ask people to reflect. Ask people to think. What do you...
Reflect on personal experience regarding whatever it is that you're trying to discuss.
Okay, so Yeah. I'm just trying to talk through and figure out where we can go with that. In terms of like working, collaborating, maybe in a meeting or making in trying to understand decisions, what we can do is talk through losses we've had in the past or mistakes we've made in the past, because we're all inclined to make. We're all inclined to fear loss, or it's called loss aversion. That's another cognitive bias. We're all inclined to make a choice that. Okay, here's an example. So if you're about to invest money in, say, a stock, okay, and you're a day trader, right, or you trade daily, you look at the stock you're investing daily, and you see that you lost $5,000 yesterday. That feels, but believe it or not, this has been tested and stuff, so trust me on this one, but that feels about the same as tomorrow you seeing you made $10,000. Losses feel about twice as big or twice as much as wins. But when you look at it on paper, if you look at the long term, then you made $5,000, right? I mean, you lost $5,000 one day, you made $10,000 the next, right? In the grand scheme of things, you made some money. But the point is that losses feel bigger. They feel stronger. So what we can do in terms of looking at history or looking at how we've worked together, if people are inclined to not make the right decision because they feel like that last time we made this decision, something went wrong, we may be able to expand more about what's happened in the history, what's happened in what we've done in the past, and talk a little bit more about how really, in the long run, it's been successful. I'm gonna kind of move on and finish up here, just kind of in summary in terms of effective collaboration. We've talked a lot about intuitive thinking and reflective thinking. Splitting up between System 1 and System 2 activities. There are advantages to both in terms of how we define choices and architect decisions for folks. And we talked a little bit about behavioral styles of people and understanding what it means to be in each of these areas and how folks behave and how we can work with different kinds of people. The main point there is that you can adjust how you think and how you work, because if you're working with a D, they hear you better if you're being a D also. If you're working with an I, they hear you better if you're thinking and talking and speaking and writing email like an I. Believe it or not. All right. I promised a series of resources on my Twitter handle or link or whatever. I've got the slides for today, as well as the following behavioral resources. I didn't mention these guys explicitly, but the vast majority of my understanding and learning in terms of DISC and behavioral styles and working with and managing and leading people comes from this group, the Manager Tools organization. I can't recommend them more. I listen to every single podcast and highly recommend them. Their detailed, very, 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 very detailed notes are thorough in terms of explaining all these topics in terms of DISC behavioral styles. I also referenced an article and highly recommend people looking at Harvard Business Review articles if you want to understand more about the people you have to work with throughout the organization, right? We are all tech and security people. If you want to be more understanding of business culture, of marketers, of sales folks, of HR groups, of other managers, Harvard Business Review is an excellent place to start. You can read articles for free every month. Okay, you don't have to subscribe. Some thinking resources. I used this article in describing what a decision architecture choice can look like. I referenced Kahneman and Thaler extensively, so there you go. And I didn't put up my question slide, so there you go. I forgot to flip them up. But yeah, I'm ready for questions.
All right, we got about 10 minutes for questions, and this time we're a little bit differently. I'm going to pass the mic so the audio recording will get the questions. So, Tripti.
Philip, I work with a lot of groups and a lot of people, development team, QA team, networking people, data center operations. I do not have time to do disk analysis.
Sure.
Then how should I go about collaborating?
Great question, Tripti. So with a little bit of prep and study, you don't have to do this thoroughly on every single person, right? So there's a few different kinds of approaches. You could take the approach of, I'm leading my team, I want to lead my team more effectively, so team, we're all going to take the disk instrument together. That is an approach, right? But unless your entire company, posts their disk profile on their doors or on their intranet portal, and then this is not something you just know intuitively. However, the more familiar you get with disk, and I can tell you that all I've really done is listen to Manager Tools guys talk about it and do my own personal analysis of people that I meet and interact with and talk with friends about disk. You become better at kind of picking out, you know what, this person is acting like a D, let me be more D with them to communicate better. This person is acting like a C, let me be more thorough and detailed in my response, versus what I would normally do, which is yes, no, done, right? Okay, right? That's how I respond, because I tend towards D during the workday. Mike can attest to that, okay? But when I get a thorough message from Mike, oftentimes Mike may expect a very thorough response from me. I don't know, I'm not sure. But it may be that I can work better that way. So you can pick things up and you can just do it intuitively. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Okay, good. Other questions?
Sorry, it's more of an administrative question. Did you indicate the resource for the disk instrument?
Not really, because there are a number of, there's one or two free ones I've seen, which are fine to just become familiar with it. But if you're very interested, I recommend going to the Manager Tools site and doing disk through them, because they have a very thorough instrument analysis, and they give you lots of information, not just about what your behavioral style means, but how you can work with other behavioral styles as a manager or as a direct report of a manager. So the other reason why this might be interesting to you is if you've had friction or difficulty working with your manager or other team managers, this might be a way in which you can smooth some of that friction out. So you may get your own behavioral style assessed and figure out, as an I, me, how can I work better with an S, right? Does that make sense? And the Manager Tools site is a great resource for that. Great resource for that. And if you're an audio learner like me, sorry, Matt. If you're an audio learner like me, all their stuff is in podcast form, so you can get it on the commute to work.
When you started looking at disk, did you look at any of the other assessment systems and compare them? How did you?
I didn't, okay. Because I've found that it really works for me. I'm relatively familiar with Myers-Briggs and some of the other personality type instruments, so I kind of had some of that background as I learned more about disk. But I heard the Manager Tools guys talk more about disk and how it's useful in terms of understanding people's behaviors and how they're communicating with me. It was much more intuitive and easier to use than, say, understanding that, oh, I'm ENFP, they're, ISTJ, how am I supposed to, and there's ways to figure that out as well, but it's a little harder, at least for me. I need something simpler. One more? All right.
Thanks for a good talk.
Absolutely.
I found out about disk like 15 years ago. I'm sorry. Is that better? One of the things I was thinking of that causes people to pause and move to that level 2, that slower thinking, that we see all the time are these, like, if you go to a site and the SSL is not secure, the browser pops up and says, are you sure you want to continue? You want the technical details? If you say yes, it says, are you sure? And also with the market volatility last month, when I went to look at my retirement site, it actually popped up a message and said, please be aware market volatility doesn't mean you have to do anything. You know, so it's really trying to stop you from that reflective, oh my God, you know.
Myself back on there, I think the mics were conflicting, but or getting feedback. No, I know exactly what you mean, but your example is a really interesting one, and especially in security, we can see the results of ultimately ineffective UI design and kind of user experience situations, because I suspect that maybe not us in this crowd, but many people just click through the broken security, right? The broken certificate sites, the broken certificate message, which is what you're referring to, right? So people like us may think, wait a minute, you know, alert, alert, you know, the certificate is broken, and it works for us because we intuitively think slightly different than we've built other systems in terms of how we see the browser, right? How it appears to us. But other folks have become, their intuitive thinking is, that's a box I'm supposed to click through. I'm not supposed to do anything about it, right? And so that's just, I mean, this is not to say anything bad, because I don't have a better way to do it, but that is poor user experience. That user experience, it doesn't work, because it's not a choice we have architected well as a security team. There's a ton of work that security has to do in architecting better choices for people.
All right, we have time for maybe another question. Anybody else? Trupti.
Philip, out of DISC, which group was the most challenging to communicate with, and how did you overcome the challenges?
Okay, so let me see if I have. I know how I can answer that question. So if you use a little quadrant down here. In general, so I'm an I, right? So in general, my opposite is C. So typically, you know, the people that you are opposite to is the one that you have the hardest time interacting with or working with, because they're kind of they're the opposite of you. And so if this is my default behavioral style, I have to really check it when I'm particularly working with C's, okay? And similarly with D's, they can run roughshod over S's. They're those kind of, you know, calm, methodical, helpful, supportive folks. A dominant D personality can just, you know, we need to do it my way, and you know, maybe it does happen their way, but that may not be the right way to do it, or that may not be the most effective. And so you have to be the most careful in DISC with these opposing or opposite behavioral styles. Does that answer your question? A little bit? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that, I think the hardest thing that I have in terms of DISC is understanding how I can make different or more, how I can adjust my own behavior. So I tend, as an I tend to be very extroverted and interactive with people. I tend to make eye contact and speak loudly and energetically. That doesn't make everybody comfortable. It may not have made everybody comfortable in this talk. But the point being that especially if I'm one-on-one with somebody who is starting to kind of not, you know, kind of change how they're looking and maybe looking a little down and being very thoughtful and slowing down how they're talking and a little quieter, what I've learned is that I need to be very similar. I need to use less eye contact. I need to be a bit more thoughtful and methodical with how I talk.
That's very hard being an extrovert.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. I agree. Yes, it's very hard. It's very hard, but that's the challenge. I mean, if we want to be more effective in our collaboration with folks, that's the challenge.
Great.
Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it.